She whispered one sentence, 7 slippery words that slipped into the wrong ear, and by sunrise a silk-draped bedchamber smelled like a funeral pyre. The king's mistress had confided a secret that could shuffle thrones, so the court shuffled her straight onto a pile of pitch-soaked firewood. Welcome to the Royal Sleepover Medieval Edition, where gossip isn't just dangerous, it's literally combustible. Firelight still licked the chamber walls when the courtiers tiptoed in, noses wrinkling at the mingled reek of scorched feathers and ambition. A smear of blackened brocade marked the spot where Delphine de Lorcan had laughed only hours earlier, teasing the king with rumors she'd overheard in the treasury wing. Someone muttered, "She should have bitten her tongue," and someone else replied, "Tongue would have burned too." Gallows humor keeps nerves steady. After all, if a favorite can go up in smoke for bedtime chatter, what hope for the rest of them? Delphine hadn't started life aiming for the stake. Born to a minor Gascon knight who preferred dice to duels, she learned early that wit traveled faster than a horse and cost less to feed. At 16, she arrived at Valois court with one gown, 3 borrowed jokes, and eyes so quick they seemed to read thoughts mid-air. The queen liked her spite, the king liked everything else, and before winter's first frost, Delphine's quarters sat conveniently adjacent to His Majesty's. Courtiers whispered that the girl's rise proved 2 things: that beauty toppled pedigrees, and that the king's marital vows were written in pencil. What Delphine whispered that fatal night wasn't even the hottest secret swirling through the corridors. Yet, it was laden with the one ingredient guaranteed to boil royal blood: betrayal. She murmured that Charles of Navarre, official ally, occasional drinking partner, had pledged to back a Breton revolt in exchange for a slice of Normandy. Delphine thought she was amusing the king with pillow politics. Instead, she lit a fuse. The monarch's smile froze. He'd clenched her wrist, too tight, servants noted later, and asked, "Who told you that?" She hesitated, weighing loyalty against survival. Hesitation was answer enough. Court politics in 1369 were less chess than blindfolded knife fight. Everyone carried secrets like concealed daggers, and anyone caught empty-handed was presumed dead. Burning, officially reserved for heretics and counterfeiters, had recently become the king's preferred deterrent against loose talk. It sent a message Scripture never quite managed. Rumors have kindling. 3 months before Delphine's blaze, a clerk who leaked tax ledgers had roasted in the Outer Bailey. The smell wafted through lunch. Forks paused mid-air. Conversation shrank to the safe topic of weather, because weather seldom held grudges. Delphine's own fire began with procedure. First, the Privy Council convened at dawn. 4 bleary nobles and 1 pale confessor, all keen to avoid eye contact with the accused. There was no written indictment, only the verbal charge of endangering the crown by malicious divulgence. The council nodded as if words mattered. Delphine, barefoot on freezing stone, kept her back straight and her voice steady. She admitted repeating the rumor but insisted she loved the king. A dry cough from the confessor suggested love was rarely a viable legal defense. Trials require time. Vengeance prefers haste. At noon, the royal alchemist delivered 2 barrels of Greek fire to the courtyard. Spectators claimed the king read psalms while Delphine was bound to the stake, but palace scribes quietly omitted which psalms. No sense immortalizing the soundtrack of a lover's immolation. When the torch met the resin, flames shot up so suddenly that even seasoned guards flinched. Delphine managed one sentence, half scream, half curse. Secrets die slow. But her body died faster, and the secret, ironically, spread faster still. By twilight, every tavern from Paris to Poitiers buzzed with competing versions of the story. In some, she'd revealed troop movements. In others, she'd confessed witchcraft mid-embrace. One minstrel sang that she'd threatened to poison the queen with rouge laced in arsenic. The irony, of course, is that the true reason hardly mattered once rumor escaped its first host. Medieval information networks operated on the principle of contagion. Confine the initial carrier, fine, but kill her publicly, and everyone notices the infection. The palace spin doctors attempted damage control. Royal heralds proclaimed that Delphine de Lorcan was judged under the laws of sacrilege for conspiring with foreign powers. They skipped the phrase pillow talk entirely, yet the spectacle undermined its own moral. Instead of silencing whispers, the bonfire amplified them. Barons grumbled that if a mistress could be torched for a single sentence, no man's wife was safe. Merchants asked whether accidental eavesdropping might now qualify as treason. Even servants stopped gossiping over laundry vats, which left the palace eerily quiet, a silence thick with unspoken dread. King Philippe, or Philippe the Impulsive, as later chronicles labeled him with perfect hindsight, celebrated his decisive justice with a banquet. Plates overflowed, lutes twanged, and yet conversation never strayed far from flickers of orange imagined beyond the stained glass windows. The queen attended, stiff-backed and expressionless, perhaps calculating whether consequences obeyed a radius or a caprice. Somewhere between the boar course and the spiced figs, a jester quipped, "Tonight's roast is mercifully less chatty than last night's." And for a moment, even Philippe's fork paused. The jester survived only because humor, unlike rumor, came with bells attached. Easy to spot, easier to forgive. Weeks rolled on, but consequences aged poorly. Navarre learned of the mistress's fate and feigned outrage. How dare Philippe believe such slander? Diplomats scrambled to repair the alliance. Meanwhile, the Breton rebels seized 2 border fortresses, citing fear of French reprisals. Inside Valois walls, servants adopted a new survival ritual. Before speaking, they glanced at candles, as if measuring tongue risk against flame height. Chroniclers observed that the court's gossip economy crashed harder than a plague-year harvest, driving some courtiers to monasteries where silence was at least remunerated with bread. Delphine's relatives appealed for her body. Charred remains fit easily into a single casket. But the king refused, declaring her ashes property of the crown. They ended up mixed with mortar during the refurbishment of the eastern rampart, a macabre recycling no one dared question. Stones, unlike lovers, keep secrets indefinitely. Or so the masons said with straight faces while checking over their shoulders. And yet, in the grand ledger of medieval cruelty, Delphine's blaze was barely a footnote. A decade later, Queen Isabel of Aragon would order a rival suffocated beneath rose petals to avoid visible bruises. 30 years after that, Duke Jean the Fearless popularized drowning enemies in wine barrels, because nothing sells authority like ironic execution methods. Historians file these episodes under creative deterrence, wryly noting that each innovation lasted until someone invented an even bloodier memo pad. What makes Delphine's story linger isn't novelty, but relatability. Anyone who's ever whispered a half-truth into the wrong ear feels that tickle of panic. What if the walls could testify? Medieval walls, alas, listened through servants, tapestries, and occasional priests hiding behind curtains. Privacy was a luxury ranked above spices and below armies. So people bargained. Promise me your silence, and I'll promise you survival. Break either promise, and the fire pits were always pre-warmed. Historians love to debate whether Philippe truly believed Delphine's rumor or merely seized an excuse to terrorize his entourage. Sources disagree. Some paint him paranoiac after repeated assassination attempts. Others suggest he feared the queen's growing influence and chose a mistress-shaped example. The truth probably lies where it usually does, tangled between self-interest and sheer medieval melodrama. Kings rarely needed coherent motives when flame did their talking. Centuries later, tourists stroll the restored ramparts, snapping photos of stonework streaked with lichen. A discreet plaque notes the renovation date, but omits the recipe for the mortar. Guides mention wars, taxes, architectural styles, never the woman whose bones help hold the wall upright. Silence has finally won, though hardly in the way Philippe intended. The secret Delphine spoke died with her. The secret of her death endures, humming under tourist shoes. Still, every so often, a researcher uncovers a letter in a dusty archive, a duke's aide describing that lamentable conflagration of the royal favorite, or a monk scribbling that the king's heart blackened quicker than her flesh. Each document fans a fresh ember in academic circles. Debates flare. Was the Greek fire necessary? Did the queen orchestrate the sentence? Could Delphine have escaped if she'd blamed a nameless servant? Hypotheticals abound, proving that curiosity, unlike timber, doesn't burn out. Modern readers may snicker at medieval overreactions, but consider the digital whispers of today. A careless message travels continents in seconds, torches reputations, topples CEOs. We like to think screenlight is kinder than torchlight, yet reputational heat still scalds. Delphine's ghost might shrug and say, "Same bonfire, different fuel." She'd have a point. After all, royal courts have been replaced by comment sections, yet the sentence for indiscreet words often feels just as swift and just as permanent. So the next time you're tempted to leak a secret for a moment of closeness, remember Valois Palace at midnight. A sigh, a rumor, a spark. Picture a king staring at ashes that used to laugh, and a court learning that warmth is not always welcome. Then weigh your words like kindling, because once flame meets gossip, neither leaves quietly, and both are hungry for witnesses.